keep on rising to the top. Ragamuffin keeps striving in every way. International, what they call me international. When me ride palm rhythm and I move with the rhythm and I come down crucial. And me ride palm rhythm and then we sit down steady. 40 men on the place I with the one Jamal skinny. We are the general. We sit up on the rhythm and over the mic incredible. I'm be right part of the rhythm, move with the rhythm. I sit down steady. Every ragamuffin you do, I feel rock and follow me. You know you love her for your life. Make me jump up on the rhythm, make me ride it. We chat up on the mic and keep it international. Cause anytime we chop a mic, they call we give it a general.
Hey, what's up everybody? Joshua Casper here with another special Plugin Boutique dev stream. Today I'm joined by Martin Dutasta, who is the Arturia Effects Collection project manager. So he's got all the information we need to talk about that incredible set of effects plugins. Martin, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, and you?
Oh, it's a wonderful day here in Brazil. It's sunny. I can see the sun just is cranking over there where you are too. Where are you?
Well, we're based in Grenoble, like right in the middle of the Alps. So it's southeast France, let's say halfway through Geneva and the coast on the Riviera. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds absolutely wonderful. All I do ever hear is stories about the south of France. Are you in that part of the south of France where it's just nothing but incredible?
Not that part. More like the mountain part of it. But it's a nice place. It's cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Alps have quite a reputation as well, so it sounds like a dreamy place to work on such incredible plugins. Why don't you take this opportunity to go ahead and introduce yourself, maybe your position at Arturia, maybe a bit about your background and how you got to that position. Obviously, the project manager is right at the top there, so maybe just walk us through where you started to where you are, and just so people can get a feel about who we're talking to today.
Sure. So I started in the music industry something like, more than 25 years ago now. I started like sound engineer assisting in studio in both Paris and London. And I've been freelance for a while. And then I actually joined Ubisoft. So it's a video game company. And I've been their in-house mixer for more than 10 years. So I've been mixing like tons of games, soundtracks, 5.1, mixing and recording vocals for the voiceover stuff, etc. So doing most of the audio stuff at Ubisoft in the Paris office. And then I moved back to the Alps because I needed a bit of fresh air and changing the perspective. So I was always interested by the technology in a way, just knowing a bit more what's behind the tools I was using at the time. So I started digging that, and that's how I came into product management, because my position as a mixer or sound engineer was quite interesting for the companies I was working for, just having, these two perspectives. So actually, I went back to school to learn about digital signal processing for a year or two, and then joined a first company more in the broadcast industry, and I'm at Arturia now for 4 years. So, and I'm here as a product manager. So, I'm in charge of the audio range, the Fuse range at Arturia. So, we'll probably talk a bit later about the different range, but I'm solely working on audio stuff at Arturia. So it's both hardware, like audio interfaces. Now for 3 years we are releasing audio interfaces, and also working on the software side of things. So working on the FX collection and all this FX plugin.
Oh wow! So you must be pretty busy then. My goodness.
Oh yeah, oh man, it's a crazy. I mean, it's super exciting, and I mean it's a great period. I feel to be in, making music first, and also working in that area because I mean the technology, the software, even embedded processing, in hardware. It's a lot of exciting opportunity that the technology provides us, and I think I feel it's super exciting to work on tools that, I mean, even 10 years back were really only available for top-notch studios. So making this, working in this field where you can bring this super cool gear, even sometimes super old or where, very rare stuff back to almost everyone who just wants to have a fun with them on the computer. That's super cool.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. First of all, the Ubisoft and sound design and mixing and sound engineering for video games, I'd like to have you back on the channel just to talk about that specifically. Obviously, today we're going to focus on Arturia, but just that's a personal interest of mine. And we actually did a few live streams like a couple of months ago where it was all about video game, film, sound design, and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's something that is another thing that it seems like you can fill us in on. So let's table that for now, but hopefully come back to a second, although it seems like you might not ever have a second to come back.
You let me know. I'm glad to talk about it for sure.
So effects, obviously you said you're working on some of the hardware stuff. We're Plugin Boutique. We're going to kind of focus on VSTs and plugins. Okay. Another thing to point out before we move forward here is we actually have a promotion running right now, which kind of sparked us getting involved with this dev stream. Can you tell us a little bit about that promotion and what's happening with it?
Sure. So that's super simple. It's 50% off all of our individual soft. So it's including the effect plugin, but it's also including all of our instruments. So any V collection instruments, pigments, analog lab, all this is 50% off right now. And I think it's until the 8th of August or the 6th of August, 8th of August.
So people have a little bit of time to take advantage of that. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the spec sheet right here, and it literally is any individual instrument from the V collection, analog lab 5, pigments as well, which just came out with a new version a couple of months ago. Everything, all of the effects. If you buy them individually, right, you get 50% off, which is, I think effects are around $50 now instead of 100. So I think that's pretty sweet. So definitely take advantage of that. My friend Nick is managing chat right now. He'll put some links to everything in the chat so people can click and check that out. But let's talk about your role as the effects collection project manager. Like, what does your day-to-day look like? And you can just exclude the half of the day that you need to spend on the hardware side of things. But like, what exactly are you doing as that role inside of Arturia?
So if we focus only on FX, so now we are actually 2 product managers dedicated for, I've got a colleague, Francois, who's also working on the FX, because we started, step by step. But let's say today my usual regular day is handling both the long-term perspective, like thinking about the next FX, because something that's important to keep in mind is that when we develop a FX plugin, it's at least 6 months of time, of a time frame of 6 months between the moment we start writing the brief to the release. It's at least 6 months. But
yeah, that's actually a question I had was, I thought it'd actually be longer, especially with the emulation that you need to do, the testing. You know, it seems like you've got that technology. What is that technology? TAE.
Yeah. So yeah, when I say 6 months, it's actually
Minimum.
more than that. I would say 6 months. It's really when the development team will start working on it until the release. But prior that, we need to, you know, go ask users, maybe go on forums, talk to people like you guys, getting ideas, getting input from, you know, everyone around, even from our friends, you know, community of sound engineers, saying what they're missing, what they need. And we actually have a lot more ideas that what we release in the end. You know, we kind of test ideas and then we kind of nail that down to a smaller choice. So once that's I would say part of my day is working on that, looking at the next step, and the other part is also handling the ongoing project. So we just released, for example, the FX Collection 2 back in June. So we are now, you know, in the process of, okay, what will happen next year? What will happen in 6 months' time? You know, so it's always, I mean, it's managing different projects in this every day, different project, but they each have their own time frame in a way. So
So do you have any hands-on with the like the emulation stage or the coding stage, or are you essentially the guy at the top that is just organizing everybody, making sure everybody's hitting their goals and keeping in the line going forward?
So no, I don't do any coding. We have a fantastic DSP team. So DSP, digital signal processing. These are the guys who actually transform what they hear or what they, you know, the circuitries, the electronic circuitries, they transform that into mathematical equation and, you know, computing stuff. So I'm not into that, to select what we want to do and then write a specification. So usually, you know, how the product should be, how it should look, what features, what is the feature set, what we want to achieve. And then it will be back and forth with the development team who will make it happen. And when we start having a prototype, then I will get back into it. I will go into studio, having also other sound engineers testing it. So I have like a kind of pool of between 30 to 50 active sound engineers all around the world, actually, which are test base, so we can fine tune. And this fine tuning process is maybe third or half of the development time, because you know, you can get your model and your first thing down, but then you need to fine tune it. So that's also a very, when I'm in that stage, it's what keeps me really busy. And then near the end of the project, I'm pretty much involved in all the marketing, like how we want to launch the product, what is the, you know, benefit, helping the marketing team getting the product out.
Nice.
So that's different roles.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. There's many questions I have regarding what you've just said, but you did touch on the fact that you just released the FX Collection 2. Why don't you tell me now how many FX plugins that is in total, and the new ones that were added, and maybe just a kind of elevator pitch for each one of those plugins? Sure.
Okay, so FX Collection 2 now has 22 plugins in it. And what we try to aim, our goal is to kind of curate an ideal studio that you can bring into your computers. It's not, we won't, and we are not, since we started that project, doing, you know, adding stuff just for the sake of adding stuff. It's really trying to build what I will do, or what we will do, you know, if we had like unlimited amount of cash and we could create our dream studio with any artboard we would like to have. But still, even you have unlimited amount of cash, you just want to select things, you know, you want things for their sound, for their role within the mixing process, for their technology they're using. So that's how we built the FX Collection 2. So right now we have 22 effects, and we kind of release them by category for now. So we did the first one we did were filters. So these are filters from synths that we took out and provide as FX, and it's super, super cool because you can really bring a creative, I think the filters are fantastic to bring creativity on any track. If you want to dress a track with some moving, frequency shifting effect, that's fantastic. So we have 3 filters. We have 3 preamps, which are so famous console preamps such as the Neve from the Neve 1073, or Telefunken preamps, or Trident console preamps. And all of them have also the EQ part, so this preamp / EQ. We have compressors. And today, what we try to do with compressors is to provide a variety of sound, because there's so many type of compression technology, also from different era, having this different grain. So I think the compressor we have right now are really a good sample of what you can achieve with compression. So we got a FET, from the 1176. We got a ST8 tube compressor. We have DBX, which is based on VCA. We have one of the new we released is the Neve compressor, stereo compressor from the Series 3609, which is based on diode. We'll come back to it probably later because this one is super cool. So as beside the compressor, we have reverbs. So that was also a big step for us, going into reverbs. And again, we try to provide 3 reverbs with completely different character. So we got a plate, we got a spring reverb, and we have our own digital reverb that we created from scratch. So this one is not a recreation. We did delays. So again, different technology, different sound. We got a tape delay, digital delay, and BBD delay, so from the memory man pedal. We got modulation, so chorus, phaser, flanger, each of them modeled from very unique and rare units you can, are difficult to find, like the Neutron biphase, the Bell flanger, which is super rare, and also Dimension D, and the chorus from the Juno 6.
And those are, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are some of the new ones that were added to the version 2?
Yeah, so we added the new one that just came out. We added 7 plugins this time in June. So we added the Neve compressor. We added EQ, which is a Citrol EQ from old, vintage German console, super sweet EQ. We added Bus Force, which is a modular bus processor that we created from different source of inspiration. I think that one is good to speak a bit longer about it. We added the 3 modulation effects. So yeah, the 4 modulation effects. So 2 choruses, 1 phaser, and 1 flanger. So that's 7 new plugins that we added in FX Collection 2 in June.
So, I mean, first of all, phenomenal. I mean, that's 7 new plugins. I know I got an update in my downloader, my Arturia downloader. So I was very excited when I got that. But that you didn't just do that. You actually did some updates to some of the older plugins, right? I know that the Delay Tape 201 got a pretty sweet update to the preamp section. Do you want to speak on that maybe, and some of the other improvements that were made to some of the other older plugins?
Yeah. So we actually revised all of the plugins. So mostly all of them has improved tutorials. So we got in-app tutorials, so you can actually launch some in-app tutorial within the plugin, all of the FX plugin, just to learn it quickly, which is much more useful than having the paper or the big PDF on the side.
100%.
So that's cool. We also integrated all the benefit we had from V Collection 8, that was including some new preset browser, all the common feature that we inherited from V Collection 8. And that's something actually important to mention, that V Collection and FX Collection, they're developed by the same team. So when we find a new cool feature that can be applied to all of these, well, we'll probably implement it across the both collection. But on the new things we updated is mostly the Delay Tape 201, which is the recreation of the Roland Space Echo. And
phenomenal, by the way, for
yeah,
anyone who hasn't checked it out yet, even before the update, an absolute phenomenal plugin.
yeah, thank you. I really like that one. What we found out is that at the time it was one of the earlier plugin, and we thought that the preamp could be improved, but we not only improved the preamp of from the original unit, but we added a special mode which is a germanium-based preamp, which has a completely different character, which actually doesn't exist in real. But we thought it will be super cool because germanium preamp had this, crunchiness that the original Roland preamp didn't have. So it brings a different flavor, actually. So that's super cool also.
Nice. So I want to kind of shift here to emulation, talk about emulation. So I guess before we do that, and the reason why obviously is Arturia are known over the VST space as being one of, if not the best at emulating synths and effects plugins. It's just, they really sound, you'll see comparison videos online of the synth versus the hardware synth versus software, and it's indistinguishable. So before we move into that, as sort of a broad topic, I want to talk about just briefly the TAE modeling technology that you have. It's proprietary as I understand it, and I'm guessing it's the key factor that's making your company stand out amongst the rest. Is there any, and by the way, before you even answer, just for people to know, there's a brilliant page on the Arturia website which just really goes into detail about this technology, and people that are hungry for more of that can go read that. But if you can just kind of briefly walk us through what that is and why it helps get such incredibly close and realistic sounds to the original pieces of hardware.
Yeah, I think I will approach it with maybe a more different perspective from what is on the website. It's good to read it. It's very interesting. I think for me, what it's all about is mixing this mathematical, very scientific approach, which is really kind of formal. We look at the circuit, we get the unit in-house here. So we source a unit in the best condition, we have it revised or whatever, we have a unit in mint condition, and we will, if we get the circuitry, the schematics,
Mm-hmm.
we will look at it, and we'll open the box also to compare if there's some variation, if there's some difference, and all this is part of creating this model within a computer of the mixture between the schematics and what we see inside the unit. So we will do this first. The first step we'll do to create this model. So we kind of put it simply, we do equation from electronic circuit in a way. We look at it and we transform it in equation. But what's really important to me is that then we will put audio through the unit, and we put measurement signal, testing signals through the unit, and we'll compare that to what the circuit is supposed to do. Because the crazy thing about all this analog gear, there's always some difference between what you see from the schematics or the wiring, or how it's supposed to behave, and how it's actually behaving.
Yeah,
and sometimes
for sure.
Sometimes it's very small little variation, but that's key to get the sound right, because that's basically, if you just look at the schematic, I mean, anyone with the proper scientific knowledge could recreate things, but what's super important is to look at the actual audio going through the unit and what are the little difference, and modeling this too. So we model the formal thing, the scientist side of things, but we also model what we didn't expect. We saw, we had this little distortion there. We don't really understand why it's there. Sometimes we can explain, sometimes we don't really. This, like if you look at, for example, transformer, they have this behavior which is really complex. So we try to anticipate, but sometimes you measure something and say, oh, I didn't really expect that, but we put it into the final model. And TAE is for me, it's about this. It's a combination of, the scientific approach and audio going through the original unit and trying to capture this small variation that we didn't see. And the last step after these two steps is just the fine tuning, because in the end, what matters is that it sounds good.
Yes.
And sounding good is a matter of taste, of feel, of how the parameters, you just move the parameters around and it feels good, it sounds good. So there's a bit of subjectivity here that will also influence the final version. I don't know if I'm clear saying that. I think I'm really passionate about it, because I think it's crazy when you witness it. I witness it on every project. Seeing the DSP guys, seeing the big schematic, from the 50s, old schematic, sometimes they're handwritten, and opening the old box of like the tape record and looking at the old circuitry, all dusty and all, it's crazy. And then how they can transform that into mathematical equation, but also seeing the variation that we didn't expect, and they include that into the equation. And yeah,
that's like the special sauce, if you will. Like that's the thing. Like you might have a transistor or capacitor not functioning at 100%, which is going to affect the sound that goes through those things. And I assume that's what you're talking about here. But I wouldn't even know where to begin. And this is actually a question someone had in the chat right now, is like, how does someone go about who's an aspiring Arturia engineer? Like, what are some of the pathways someone could take to get into it? And it seems like it would be a heavy mathematical background, right?
It's both. We are all passionate about music. If you look at all the people within the company, in contact with all the product we make, we are musicians to various degrees, but we are all passionate about it. And I can say from the FX, and it's the same for actually all the instruments of the collection, it's a kind of goal we will never totally achieve, but we try every time, is how to capture this little magic that we didn't expect. Yeah. Because that's, I call it maybe the analog grain. I don't know how to express it, but like analog gear, especially analog gear, it has this grain. And it's sometimes also cycle, sometimes it's also in your head, like, because it's a physical, nice unit with knobs you can turn on. It has an influence in the sound, in a way how we perceive it. And the big goal and the question is, how can we convey that into a plugin? Yeah. And that every project we try to do that. So it's, you need scientists, you need, Kevin next door, he's the guy who did the plate reverb. He's a acoustician, he's mad about all this stuff, but he's also a musician, and he understands when I say, I would like, can you see this? Can you hear it? Can you feel it? And he tried to capture it. So that's the extra sauce,
Yeah, so you need the music knowledge, you need the music passion, but you also need you need to go to school. You need that math. You need to be able to look at a circuit and make it into a mathematical equation. So whoever asked that question, I hope that's enough. But if you're here watching this, it seems like you probably have both interests in mind. So go for it. So the effects collection, there is, I would say, mostly emulated from hardware, but not all. I know you've got a reverb in there. I believe one of the delays might be. And then the new bus plugin, BusForce, the compressor is actually an Arturia digital compressor, right? Maybe if you could walk us through not only the plugins that are digital and why you chose to do them digitally, but also just what are you looking for in a piece of hardware? And this is obviously two separate questions, but like, what are you looking for in a piece of hardware when you're like, I want to make or emulate that piece of hardware? Because I know one of the new EQ, the Siddle, was from a 70s German broadcast console. Like, for me, I had no idea that 70s German broadcast console existed. Like, first of all, how do you know that it existed? How do you know that it sounds absolutely brilliant and it's worth spending the time and the effort and adding it to your collection? Like, What's the process there? I know those are two separate and completely different questions, but if you could just maybe walk us through both.
No, sure. That's interesting. I think it's a combination of different factors. The first one is talking to the users. And if I take the example of the Citrol, you have this guy, Ricardo Damian. He's like a top-notch engineer working in London and New York. He's a Mark Ronson engineer, mixing engineer. So he worked, on numerous hits. And we had a good relationship. And he's, I knew from one discussion we had one time that he had this Telefunken AQ and this old German, various models and Siemens, especially the Siemens models from the 70s. So I start digging into that, and then it's also about analysis what the competition in a way is offering, what we can find on the market, but there's no sometimes you can do a model that already exists because you believe you can make it better, or you can add something new to it. And sometimes it's because it's really rare. The Bell flanger, for example, it's a super rare unit, and that's Joe Barresi, who told me, if you have ever to do one flanger, do that one. And don't forget about all the other ones, just do that one. I'd never heard before about Bell flanger. It's a company who died since, there's very few models around. But then when you dig into it, you say, oh, okay, that's the sound of a lot of hits in the 80s, and it's still in use in some studio in the UK, for example. And you start digging that, and you see the possibility of it, and you say, oh, you get interested. So you source a unit to talk to other engineer, you test it. I test it myself. It's super fun to use. And that's how, and then we also even do surveys, like, we will ask our users, and maybe, I'm preparing a new survey, for example, for our FX user right now. And usually, say, hey, what do you see us doing next? That's also information I take. And that's how the mixture of this becoming, we get the selection in the end. But it's mostly talking to engineers and some of our users, etc.
Well, I mean, we could take a short survey right now. Everybody who's watching can say, what are the next effects they'd like to see in the collection? So let's just circle back to digital. What are the fully digital effects in the collection at this point? And maybe we'll talk about the digital inclusion of the digital compressor, the Arturia compressor on bus force. And then you said you wanted to talk about it a little bit more in depth. Perhaps you can just from there jump into letting us know why that's special.
Yeah, sure. So we from the start, we didn't want to stick only to vintage analog gear, because if I had today to create my own super studio, with hardware or whatever I wanted to, I would like both of them, because both have, digital and analog have their quality, and I need both in my mixes. So, and the thing also is because Arturia team is gaining experience doing, audio stuff with the V collection and building this FX collection, that we felt also more and more confident we could get super result by creating our own stuff. And so that's how we started with the delay Eternity. So that's a digital delay, and we looked for a lot of digital delay around already existing, or hardware or software, and just came out, with our take on it. And sometimes, like, Eternity is really influenced by modulation capability, because that's where we come from in a way with synths, So we kind of, take what we know about the most, and then we want to venture in that direction, then we have a go for it. The reverb intensity was also something like that. Actually, it was a bit different. It was an opportunity because, like I talked about Kevin, or one of our top DSP guy, he was working on acoustic prior coming to Arturia. So he had this idea of a model he wanted to work on. So we say, okay, let's do it and dig into that. And again, it's talking to user and say what you would like to see in reverb that you don't really see that much. what you would see us adding and what we felt as a user. Also, I would like to have in Reverb like post and pre equalizer or filter, for example, modulation capability. So all that help us to build a digital model from our own, which is our own. And BuzzForce, which is the latest, is a bit different because it's really a combination of various sources of inspiration I had since I was studio assistant. And I can just make a remark on that is at the time in the 90s, in the end of the 90s, there were no internet to learn about, mixing stuff. So you would read articles in magazine. And I clearly remember discovering the Michael Brower, this quite famous engineer who worked with Coldplay. And he has these techniques of parallel processing. And when I read that, I was blown away, creating different buses, each of them with different processing. And you would put a source in, you can a bit of a source in each of the bus to make your mix. And that's actually BuzzForce come from that. And then we look at the piece of gear we would like in these different buses to do this parallel processing thing. So we look into the overstayer modular channel, which is a huge influence on the product. And it's if to anyone having the ability to try the hardware thing, it's crazy. It's a great hardware unit. We look, I wanted a Pultec EQ because on a bus, that's something super cool. I love the sweetness of it and the way the curve act. We wanted to add like a filters from the SAM, so it's a SAM synth. So we added also, and the compressor itself inside BuzzForce is both inspired by the overstayer model actually, but it's mostly, it's not a recreation, it's an inspiration, because there we tried and we had a lot of back and forth, months of fine tuning on the compressor only to get the right macros. How if I touch this parameter, it not only touch one parameter but various ones, so you get this sweet spot really easily. So that's for me, BuzzForce is really special. It's a kind of a dream product come true for me as a user, but it's also all these influences in a single unit, which you can apply to your vocal bus, to your drum bus, even your mix bus.
So the idea there is that you send a sound into Mixbus, and essentially it's like sending that sound into 4, or is it 4 or 5? I believe it's 4, right?
So in BuzzForce, it's 3 buses, but you have 5 or 4, 4 module plus the clipper.
Okay. So it's like sending that sound source to 4 different buses, which you then have control over right inside of the one plugin. Not only that, but you have a control over the mix of how much is getting sent to that. So it's like in parallel instead of in series on one single bus chip.
You get like it's not faders, it's knobs, but it's like if you had like 3 faders, and on each you can put different inserts. So you can decide on one, I will put nothing, it will be just my dry signal coming from the input. On the second one, I could put, okay, I'll only put the filter and the compressor. And on the third one, I'll put the EQ and the distortion, or maybe also the compressor. So you can really, have a part in series and a part of parallel. And then you can dose what you want together and have a total control about this mix in a way. And it's really interesting because you can go really hard processing, like crazy. We have negative ratio on the compressor, which means you can go minus infinity of ratio. I don't know if you can imagine what it means, but it's actually changed completely the groove of a drum track, for example. It really inverts things totally, it mess up. But you can go be really radical, but you only put this completely messed up signal back into your mix very slightly, very subtle, with subtlety, and that bring this little movement inside your track that if you were not using parallel processing, I don't think you could achieve that. So I really like that because you can be really radical within the modules. Like if I want to have a resonant filter and mess up with my drum kick, and you can do it, and then you just bring it really nicely within the dry track, and it's just adding this little, you know,
little extra spice there.
spice.
No,
That's it.
I think I remember I watched a video. I haven't had hands-on with it yet, unfortunately, but I watched a video and it said that there were like, was it like over 200 different routing possibilities inside of the effect plugin itself?
I think the combination, the routing combination, it's 36, so it's a bit less. You have 36 different routings, but then if you put, you know, different settings in each of the module, there's no, I mean, there's a lot to explore.
Nice. So definitely check that out. Currently on sale, right?
Yeah, Bus Force. It's definitely something you should try. We just released it in June, but I can tell you, we'll have a lot of in the coming months of, you know, top sound engineer not endorsing, or we'll see. I hope endorsing it, but you know, they just get back to me and say, "Oh, that thing is insane," and I think it's really.
That actually brings me to a quick question we had in the chat, and that is, do you have a personal favorite or a personal couple favorites from the effects collection that maybe you just are really inspired by the way it turned out, or something that you use actually in the process of making your own tunes or mixing your own music?
I love. It's difficult to single one out.
I know it's like your children, and you're probably obligated to say I love them all, but we were just wondering if there's one or two that you find yourself using more than the other.
Well, let's say I would invite people to venture into the less known of within the collection, and two I would point out. I mean, Bus Force obviously, but the Bell Flanger. I mean, again, it's Joe Barresi who told me if you had to do one, do that one. It's really interesting because it's a flanger, but you had 3 different modulation sources. You've got like a LFO, standard LFO, an envelope follower, and a manual mode in a way. And you can mix the 3 modulation together, so you get all this strange pattern. It's really worth a try. And the other one I really like, and I use it all the time, is Spring Reverb, because it's a mono reverb. I use it in mono, and it's great, fantastic on vocals. If you want to get back to, you know, the Amy Winehouse sound, or Lee Scratch Perry, you know, dubstep like sound, it got this Germanium preamp, which was really, really difficult to model. It took us a lot of time, but you can really crank up the signal through it, and it gives a color to your sound, which is incredible. And what interesting is, like, for example, the preamp is so good that the dry wet of the unit, the plugin, is not between the incoming signal and the reverb signal. It's between the preamp output and the reverb output. So you can, you know, just use it even at a distortion box in a way. So nice. I really invite people to try these two. They are amongst my favorites.
Okay. We've actually got a bunch of questions from the chat, which I'll jump into in here in a minute. But I actually want to shift focus, well, not really shift focus, but talk about the legality of emulating hardware. It's just a question I've always had on my mind. Like, if I have a software, right, and I take the code from that software and paste it into a different shell, I have copyrighted that. Like, I have a broken copyright law, essentially. Yeah. What is the legality of, one, copying the circuitry of a piece of hardware into digital form, and then I'm guessing it's a separate piece to be able to use the name and the likeness on the GUI itself? Like, what are the legal standpoints for both of those aspects, and how are they related or unrelated?
Yeah, that's an important point. First of all, I think people, you need to understand that it's not about copying the circuitry. It's the knowledge to do so, to look at the electronic circuit and to make it into a code, which is not something like, you know, you just do it and you copy it. It's something that requires a lot of expertise. And then there's company that are really careful about, you know, the look of the GUI. You know, sometimes it's even the look, and I totally understand that you don't really want. You know, I can understand a brand doesn't want us to be associated with them. So in fact, we don't use, if we don't have any license agreements, then we will not use the name. We will maybe change something if it asks us to do so. But it's again, uh, we're not like, you know, taking the component and putting in a physical board and trying to make a copy. Like you can find recreation of, you know, a lot of things in the hardware. We don't do that. We analyze what has been done and we respect that. And actually, sometimes I feel it's an homage when we try to fine tune it because we want to go beyond what we can hear on the original, or we also adding stuff. And that's also something important. We never limit ourselves to the original feature set. We always think that because it's in digital domain, we should do more. And that's why on most, almost all of them, actually all of them has what we call an advanced panel, which is featured that does not exist on the hardware version of it if it's a recreation, because we think that as a plugin, as a software, user have different needs, and maybe because also the hardware has certain limitation because it's a hardware, because you can't do anything you want. So again, these two, these two elements, I feel we're not, you know, it's our take to this iconic gear, and we do not pretend we'll be as good as totally a picture of the exact picture of the original. And yeah, that's it.
No, that makes it.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it seem like I was saying you copy and pasted anything. I was just saying if I think about that and then I think about taking the circuitry and recreating it, it just seems like I didn't know, and that's why I was asking. I don't want you to feel like I was.
No. But it's really, you know what? It's actually very often we don't have the circuitry because they're not available. So sometimes like very old stuff like the CM1 CQ, these are stuff that are not produced, not been produced for 40 years, you know, and you can find on internet the circuit schematics, and you find it the old paper schematics, so that can be of help. But usually, current design that are still made, we don't have the circuits. So it's mostly about opening the box and trying to figure out and doing measurements and analyzing the audio coming out of the unit that we managed to make the recreation.
That makes sense. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for clearing that up for me. I was just always wondering that. And just on you mentioned modern features. What goes into deciding what should be added in terms of modern features? Obviously, technology has changed since a lot of these original machines have been created. Limitations, as you mentioned, in building a hardware unit. There's space to consider, there's cost, there's the technology of the circuitry itself. Like, what goes into the process of being like, yeah, I think we should actually add this to give our users, you know, the more modern feature set, or something that's been around for a while that just hadn't been on the original, like, what unit? What's kind of the process there?
So for me, the main thing is respect the spirit of the original. So if we are adding something to a vintage unit, I think we need to actually, and I love doing that, because as a plugin, you miss so much of the hardware feel, and you know, you're not touching real knobs, and we don't want to do, again, we're not doing like a straight copy of it. We want to add stuff to make that so it makes more sense in a digital domain. But first, I'm really keen on keeping the spirit of the original. One example is if you are having this vintage groovy, you know, a bit spring reverb that you want to add additional feature to it, I don't want to lose the spirit of the original, which is, you know, it's a bit clunky. It has this really distinctive sound. I don't want to transform it into any digital reverb or add any type of modulation, just to modulate. So sometimes user will get back to me and, hey, why you didn't add this and that? It's true that we could add anything. Frankly speaking, we could. But I like to limit it because I feel also what makes this hardware beautiful is that they had limitation. Like they had limitation because they had a certain form factor or because the technology at the time had limitation. So sometimes, we don't want to keep one example. For example, if you take a Neve preamp, it's like, a step control, because at the time they had these switches and behind you have resistor and you had to be stepped. So
as opposed to like an infinity control where you could fine tune it by
So exactly. So one question was, should we keep that or not? And I felt, for example, that was something we could add in a digital domain because we could be infinity control and being smooth, and you can go precisely to an exact frequency you would like without changing the nature of the original. And in fact, for the Citra LAQ and for the Neve compressor, what we did was actually transform this step control with having the option to turn them into smooth or continuous control. So that's the type of thing I would add. But for example, on the spring reverb, I wouldn't add sync to tempo feature. It seems silly, but for me, the spring reverb, for me, it's not about exactly the right length of a decay, for example. You're not setting your spring reverb with saying, oh, I want to do 1.7 second decay or being sync exactly to the tempo. You just turn the knob until it sounds good.
Yeah.
And on the contrary, maybe with a digital reverb, you want to know exactly it's 1.7. So it's keeping the character and the spirit of what we do.
Absolutely fantastic. So I think I've got a bunch of questions here, and we're almost at an hour, so I think we should jump in. I'll let you know right off the bat that a lot of them are, what's the future? And I know that it's always the question, but it's always the question that no one can ever really answer. Maybe if you could be vague for us, like what is there anything that we should be excited about in the most vague terms without getting you into trouble?
Yeah, it's a tough question, especially these days. We're really in the brainstorming process for the next step. But I think if we get back to this idea of creating this ideal studio, we'll keep doing probably some of the vintage stuff. But I also want to venture into more modern stuff. I want to try. I think and it's the same if you look at the V collection, this vintage, all the vintage synths and pigments, which is a brand new modern digital synths. I think that balance is super healthy and also something that as a user, I want to get in the studio to combine these two. So I think the future will be getting this balance and working on this balance of keeping doing vintage stuff, making it available for everyone, looking also for the unique, some stuff which are a bit niche, like, you heard about it and you say, oh, I like also that kind of, digging into the music history to find something that really defined a sound or an era. And also venturing into very creative stuff. Looking at, we have this fantastic sound designer team that does all of our synths preset or working on pigments. They have ideas. They do modern production. And I don't want to let them down. I want them to have also the tools for their production. So we'll venture in both directions. So I don't know if I answer a lot.
You can't blurt out the business plan, even if if you have a specific. I mean, that's always it's a question that everybody wants to know, but it's the question that no one can answer. You know what I mean? Those are NDA level responses, and it's But we have to ask. We have to try to get the exclusive. You understand?
But everyone be assured, in a way, I really love hearing from people what will be the wish list. And
so you said you're going to do an actual survey coming up. Is there a way people can be involved with that? Is it on the newsletter? Or is it people who own a plugin already? How do you contact?
the survey will be intended for everyone owning at least one of our FX.
Which can be bought right now, 50% off on Plugin Boutique.
Exactly.
So click that link and you can be a part of the future of Arturia FX. That seems
Yeah,
like a...
but what I really, it takes time because I like to answer to, you know, people have some discussion, so it takes a lot of time, but I really evaluate that. And in the end, I think a good, also part of my job is yeah, talking to the users. So if we get the opportunity to talk, I'm more than happy. Sure.
What about just in general? Are there, let's take it as a synth and an effects plugin, are there any vintage pieces of gear that you personally are aware of, had hands-on with, that you personally would love to see as part of both the V collection and the effects collection? Like, is there something you think is missing, or maybe not necessarily missing, but you would love to see as a part of the family of both of those collections? Because you've done that, like on the, especially on the synth side, you've covered most of the bases, yeah. I would imagine. So
yeah, well, in the synth side, it's interesting because we've been doing that for 15 years, I think now. The V collection. It's I don't even remember when the first one, the Mini V, came out, but we actually, even if we now cover a lot of the vintage synths, I mean the major one or the most known one. We did that on V Collection 8 is to get back to some of the earlier version we did to improve them. And we feel that it's something because the technology evolved. So even if we already, for example, did like a Jupiter, or, you know, we improved it and released it again with an up-to-date technology. And I think that's super interesting to not only get new stuff, but also keep the one we have in both collection up to date with the top, you know, the best we can do, what the technology afford us. And that's, we realized that when working on the new synths for V Collection 8, how they sounded much better than the one we had in the catalog from, you know, the same model we updated. It was crazy to realize how much, you know, miles we covered since the release of the first one. So that's also something. I mean, we have ideas for new stuff, but we also want to keep up to date the current catalog.
So you're telling me that you have in some room somewhere all of those effects hardware units and all of those synths just there waiting if you need to go back to them? There's some sort of paradise over there in France that's like an underground bunker with...
Sort of. Sometimes we have to rent it because they're so rare or expensive. So or sometimes we even go in the studio. Like the Tridents, we went to Denmark to measure the original, you know, Metallica. I mean, the original Trident console that was used for the first Metallica album, because we wanted to get that one and we couldn't buy it, you know. It's quite a big piece of gear. So sometimes we travel in the right studio to get the gear. But right here, right now, I got the Belt, Dimension D, the Space Echo, the Mutron is right over here. So we get some of the hardware unit in-house. It's much easier to test it and do all the fine-tuning, just the A/B testing part of it, yes.
Well, when I get to Europe, hopefully fairly soon, I'll have to pop by and we can do this face-to-face and you can show me around, because my mouth is watering. Just seeing the couple synths there behind you, I need to be in the room, and I am extremely jealous of where you are right now. Another interesting question from the chat was, is there like a favorite artist or two or three that you feel it really shows off Arturia products, you know, like really puts them to, or pushes them to where they should be in terms of how they're used?
There's so many.
Yeah, I imagine.
I give you one anecdote about the FX. Joe Barresi, you know, famous LA sound engineer. I had the chance to visit his studio 2 years ago. He was super cool guy. He invited us to his place, and he got a studio I think he got 6 or 7 or 8 1176, and he got all different version of it, like revision, the black fade, the metal fade, the purple one, all of these, and a lot of other gear. Actually, he's got a pedal board. He's a pedal freak. He got so many guitar pedals. Anyway, uh, it was such honor for us that in the end he's using our recreation alongside his 7 or 8 1176 in his mixes. And the reason is because ours sounds slightly different from any of the one he has. So all of these, including ours, sounds a bit different, has different flavor to it.
Right.
And I think that's about it. You can be a completely gear addict and buy anything, or you just keep a very limited amount, or just work in the box. But in the end, what you're looking for is different character, flavor, and the difficulty actually is knowing each piece of your gear enough so this has this specific character. And for me, that was really eye-opening at the time that he told me that, because it doesn't matter. In a way, ours is a bit different from the one he has, but he will pick up, depending on the situation and what he wants to achieve. And I find it, super interesting to see that a guy like this, who's really into hardware also, will not hesitate to pick up a software because he feels that on this particular track he needs it.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good. And I mean, he's a super. He's such a great guy, because he always answer. If I have question, what do you think about this piece of gear? Do you have any idea about if we want to do this? What do you recommend? And it's so it's great to be. I mean, there's a lot of artists like this that we have the luck now to be able to contact and get feedback and watching their workflow and just try to understand how they work, what they're looking for. And I think the common ground for all these guys is they want their sound. They want to achieve something that is unique. And in a way, our goal, and maybe it's a goal of all plugin manufacturer or hardware manufacturer, is to provide the tool so they can be unique. So, they can use it in a way that make their track unique in the end. I love that part. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're doing a great job with it, both you personally and Arturia as a company. As I said earlier in this conversation, the reputation of Arturia is known globally as one of, if not the best, hardware emulation manufacturers of digital plugins in the game. So we're incredibly honored to be able to have both Arturia on the website and to be able to talk to you today about these. I know we were supposed to talk to the gentleman who was the project manager for the V collection, but unfortunately he was out for a limited time and we were unable to get him. Maybe we will be able to get him in the future to talk. But I mean, we took up an hour, just you and I chatting about effects. So I mean, I don't even know if we even let him talk about instruments. So
No.
maybe it was good that we're going to be able to split that up into two different conversations. But Martin, thank you very, very much for coming by today. I know you're a busy man with everything you've got going on and all your different job titles over there, Arturia. They're working you to the bone, but you took your time, an hour out today to talk to us and fill us in on the information about the effects collection and just emulation in general and Arturia as a company. Thank you very much. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up, besides the fact that there's a huge promotion on all the plugins, 50% off? Pluginboutique.com, go there now. But is there anything else you want to just let us know before we wrap up?
No, I mean, try them. I mean, that's all I can say. Try them. Get back to us if you have any comments, remark, and I'm happy to discuss that. And I hope you enjoy them.
All right, wonderful, Martin. So we'll let you go, and hopefully we'll be able to chat soon. Like I said, when I get over there in Europe, I'm going to come by the studio. I need to see what you got going on. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to speaking to you again, hopefully in the near future.
Cool.
All right,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, and we'll see you in the next live stream.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.